today we're back on a quick 360 and we have Kinga Brassay, artist, educator, an inspiration to all that sees her work and talks to you a little bit about creativity and art. So that's, I think, what our main focus is here today, is to just dive into your mind and kind of extract a little bit of the artist wisdom within you today. Yeah, it's great. I've known you through your husband, actually, so that's a funny connection. Is her husband is a student placement counselor at the Concordia, and I was bringing on interns at Jackson Labs, and Kinga's husband Andres and I had a conversation about art one day, and he's like, my wife's into art, and pulled up your work, and it spoke to me in a way, because art's a big piece of my life. I like Mark Rothko, like obviously you got Van Gogh, you got a lot of up and coming people, Jackson Pollock, going to MoMA, and just seeing these massive pieces of art that like they influence you on like a subconscious, like consciousness level that maybe there's no scientific physics behind it that we can quantify with math, but like I think it's out there, and I think as an artist, it's, yeah, just let's dive into your mind, and what I want to cover today is kind of, yeah, your vision as an artist, a bit of your journey, maybe the creative process, and maybe how people can integrate creativity into their lives, and just whether or not you're an artist, right? But there is value in the creative way, as I call it. So, Kinga, welcome to the show.
Thank you for the opportunity. I'm really glad to be here. And yeah, I'm thinking, where should I start? Because I have to cover my whole life in a nutshell, basically, because I've been asked so many times, like, how did you start doing art? And well, I did this my whole life because I grew up with artist parents, professional artists, that they are actually making a living with art. So it wasn't just a hobby. So I grew up with that. I couldn't imagine myself doing something else, although it came a time when I had the feeling that I should try something else, because this is what I did my whole life. So maybe I'm good at something else as well, or maybe I want to do something else as well. And I always like to talk about this when I have my classes as well to my students, because I feel that that gap or that break that I took from art, it led me back to my real journey, to my real call, to say it like that, to do art. Because that's when I realized that, why do I want to do something else when my call is art? So, you know, when you feel that inside, and I think that once I realized that, the door started to open up, you know, like the whole universe starts to come to you and just to welcome you, that, okay, finally you realize what you want to do, right? But I needed that break. So it's not always that straight that you decide that, oh, I'm going to do art and let's do it, right? And to be honest, even today, there are ups and downs and ups and downs, and that's it, right? So it's never like that. And it's never just the beautiful side of it, what you post on social media. So everyone needs to know that yeah, that's part of it as well.
There's
and
a gritty
we
side.
have those, we have those moments as well. And it's important to acknowledge that. But there's a lot of struggle behind the walls that we don't show to the world, right? And I know that I talk to so many artists lately, and I know that it's not just me. Like, everyone is struggling with so many things, right? Like, even if it's the business side or anything else. The problem with this, what I feel, is that art is still not, or being an artist is still not recognized as a profession.
Right.
And I would love to fight for this so much, that one day to be different.
So what do you think is the barrier to it, I guess, as art being acknowledged as more of a profession, and artists being able to like do the work and get paid for it sustainably?
I think it's still taken as a hobby. So what I realized when I introduce myself, you know, when I go somewhere and I meet new people, I'm like, okay, this is my name. What do you do? And I'm a visual artist, and you know, I can see the reaction on people's faces, like seriously, like, isn't that a hobby? You know, without words, you can just sense that. And that's sad. I feel that that's sad, because for so many years, like all this art was looked in a way that is just something secondary that you do, right? So you have to do so, you have to have a profession to pay your bills, and then next to it, yeah, you can sell your artworks.
Right.
But what I want to fight for, and I really feel something inside of me, that there is a calling that a call inside of me that I want to change this. I know I cannot make such a big change, but still,
Maybe.
because yeah,
You never know,
maybe.
right? Like you can't say that you're
somebody
not
needs to
capable.
start it, right? But you know what? It's not just me, because I'm surrounded by so many artists now, and I had so many conversations that I feel that everyone is just giving up. That, well, that's it. It's everywhere. It's around the
Yeah.
world. That's what I got from one of the artists. Well, we cannot change this, and I said, well, you don't have to take it like that. We need to do something about it, right? So I really wish I could afford, and actually before we moved to Canada, because I'm from Europe, I didn't start with my background, right? I jumped right
Hey, it's
into the
okay.
middle
Our
of it.
show is, we usually just jump right in the middle of everything.
The thing is that I have so much that I want to talk about. So actually, I had an interview because before I left Europe. And what I mentioned there in that interview, I said that I know I'm moving to a different continent, and you know, when you're an immigrant, you might have to take jobs that you might not do at home, but you have to still do
Right.
them. And I said, my dream and my goal is to do something art related, to do something that I still feel that it's me.
Right.
And I was lucky enough to get into that, and at an early stage when we moved here. But it's so important. I really, now I'm mentioning it again, that I really want to do this as a full-time job, and I really want this to be taken as a profession, and to make a living from it, and to
Right.
pay your bills from it. Because let's be honest, there is a lot of work here. So sometimes I come downstairs to the studio in the morning and I realize that it's dark outside.
Yeah.
And I didn't even take a break. And I don't even need it. That's not the point. But it's still hard work and a lot of work until something like this comes to light.
Totally.
So,
I think it's interesting, thinking about, artist as a profession. And I think where we're at right now is a lot of artists end up finding an adjacent creative position that maybe as an interior designer or architect or graphic designer or marketing, doing social media, which as I've been diving into the world of YouTube and as a platform, I'm pretty big on it because there's so much work that goes into creating media, creating designs, creating content, creating art that, people see the end product and they don't realize that, like, I was up till 3 o'clock in the morning throwing 200 splices into a YouTube video, like trying to find graphics, animation. Like, there's a lot of work that goes into it that people just don't realize, that YouTube is a platform. They'll pay you eventually once you get the views, where a lot of the other platforms, Instagram, like, you want to be popular on there, but in the end you have to pull people off of the platform in order to make $1, right? Which just doesn't make sense to me right now, where I'm like, YouTube, okay, they'll pay you based on every 1,000 views that you get on your video that are monetized once you reach a certain point, that then can at least, like, you build that community there, and then you can pay to create this content that dives into all the aspects of art, which is maybe where it can become a more viable profession in the world we're living in. Because my parents are 70s, they sit at home, and instead of watching cable anymore, now they're just browsing YouTube for different things, right?
Really?
They're watching Steve Harvey's Family Feud highlights, Cesar Millan training a dog, like car stuff. Like, they dive in, and I've noticed even just from the short little while I've been doing this channel, a lot of my content get consumed on TV, and like a good portion of it, like double the average of anyone on their phone or their computer. It's like the TV viewers are highly engaged and ready to watch it, where just as all these platforms and media start to become a thing, it's maybe there's an opportunity, because art is about the inspiration and the feeling, like figuring out how to capitalize on YouTube as a platform to educate people while they sit at home on these things of, hey, art does this. This is your home. It's your temple. Like, you should have it be not only reflecting who you are, but who you are trying to become, right? And that's where I always feel art and creativity played a big role in my life. Is you surround yourself with these things that help you vibrate on a different frequency, I guess, right? Whether just even sitting around these paintings, like you feel a sense of like sophistication and like sometimes a little chaos, but like we're trying to make sense of the chaos.
There's
Like
a lot of chaos in there.
I'd rather have the chaos here
Yeah.
than here. And depending on what it is, you can start to compartmentalize different pieces of how you're feeling in here into that. So it's like, okay, I'm feeling stressful. I'm going to go over to this piece of art and just kind of look at it for a few minutes and like absorb what it does. And sometimes it can pull it off of you, right? Or maybe put that idea into your mind. So
That's interesting, actually, that you mentioned, because I really would love to mention that chaos behind the work, because when I come down to my studio, I really want to create something not just beautiful, but also I just try to reflect, like, what are my feelings now? What am I struggling with lately? Or what is going on inside of me? Because we are struggling with similar things, right? Like as humans in general,
Totally,
right?
yeah.
It doesn't matter if you have money or you don't have money, or what profession do you have, right? We're still going through the same emotions, right? If we lose someone, there's grief, right? Or if we're happy, then we have different. So all that I'm not afraid to show that in my art, right? So my goal is not just to create something beautiful and you can put it on the wall and, oh, it looks good, right? But I really want that piece to speak, to speak to the viewer, that they stop for a second and they say that, oh yeah, well, this has a deeper meaning, and just for a few seconds, just to try to think about it. Like, it doesn't have to be the same thing that what I was feeling when I painted it, because we are always on different levels in our lives, right? Like, so maybe they're going to remind them of something else. But my goal is people to stop and to just try to think that, okay, like, what is this? What is behind this? Like how do I feel when I'm looking at this painting, right? And what does it remind me of? So and I feel that that's more than just a decorative piece on the wall.
Totally, it's becoming part of you. It's environment. Your environment helps you become who you are, right? It's why people say, I think big Marine U.S. soldier kind of guys, there was this one, I forget his name, maybe I'll include it in the comments or something, but his whole thing was like, do you make your bed in the morning, right? Like, if you don't make your bed in the morning, I'm going to show you what your life is like, because there's all these little indicators. And it's funny, I was listening to this podcast on Joe Rogan with this guy, Thomas Campbell, who's a physicist, that kind of, he's a consciousness guy, right? But also hardcore PhD physicist, like, how does the math of the universe work? But like, there's this piece that like consciousness exists between you and I, and what is it doing for us, and how are we absorbing the information and manifesting, and like, what are all the possibilities that could go on? What are the possibilities of those probabilities? And the more you start to stack the universe in your favor of like where you're trying to go, or processing emotion, or whatever these roadblocks are that people deal with, which is where I feel art comes into it. It's like, how do I process this stuff, right? Like,
and I like that, again, processing emotion, because I feel that I was always interested in psychology. That was something that I said that, okay, if I'm not going to do this, let's try that to become a psychologist. And so I was always interested on a different level, right, about who we are, why are we on Earth, right? What is our calling?
Yeah.
Like, it needs to be more than just wake up in the morning, right? Make your bed, if you make your bed, and then just the daily routine, and find a job and all that. So
it's like, why is making your bed important, right? Like, why can't you live in chaos?
Because nobody's gonna see it, right? You can just close the door, and then when you come home, that's the first thing that you're gonna see when you enter, right? Isn't it better when you see that? Well, it looks good, right? Actually, it's what I wanted to get with this is that there are so many people that they don't like to talk about their emotions. I realized this, and I realized over my career as well, like even as being an art educator. And sometimes so many people that, you know what, I don't want to acknowledge that I have emotions. And I remember, I don't want to say names, but I remember once I was called that I'm so sensitive. And it was pointed out like that's a negative thing in one of my workplaces.
Totally.
And then, you know, I went deeper and I realized that that's not a problem. And you need all that sensitivity to create something like this behind that what we have behind us, right? So you need to just stop for a second and you need to think that what is going on inside of it. I cannot just hide all my emotions. I would not be able to create all this. So it's important to understand. Of course, you have to know how to deal with emotion, right? That it's not going to affect your life. But in general, people who are creative, they don't hide their emotions, right? And that's actually interesting how you mentioned that earlier, that this is something like, I feel sometimes that I try to say something without words, right? I cannot even. So I feel that it's more like a therapy, and I feel that's the point of art therapy as well. So I come downstairs to my studio, I come down with frustration, with a lot of things going on, right? There's always like something going on.
Totally.
Let's be honest, right? And then I come downstairs and then I start painting, and I'm nervous sometimes and I want to put all that into the canvas, but I don't mind, right? Because then there's the result, right? So I'm just gonna put all that in there. But when I'm done, of course, it might be the whole day, right? From morning till late evening, but I feel better. I feel relieved. So it's interesting. It's there, right? So I feel like I went to therapy. So it's really, really interesting how we have to sometimes let that go, right? But we have to acknowledge it first, because if I don't acknowledge it, I cannot put it on the canvas. So I just want to encourage everyone, whoever received this, it doesn't have to be at your workplace, it can be anywhere, that you might be too or highly sensitive. That's not a problem. You just have to know how to deal with that, and you have to know that that's something, a need. Because think about it, what if we would have only people on the world who were not sensitive at all?
Like robots or something like that, basically.
So we have a soul, we have humans, and I'm not afraid to encourage my students as well about this, that don't be afraid, and yes, you have a bad day, you have frustration. I deal with frustration so many times when I'm in my studio, but that's part of it. You just have to know how to deal with that as well, right? But it's there, it's normal.
What I would like to kind of touch on there with emotion, and I think it's like in my own belief system, it's kind of like I look at it like you're a wizard from Harry Potter, right? Like maybe like you are Harry Potter, and until you know, like emotion can take you in a lot of dangerous places, right? If you don't know how to like manage it. It's like there's too much power in emotion. That it's like having wizard abilities that, like, if you're not controlling it, things can go wrong. That, like, I think as you grow up and refine and become aware of emotion, it's learning how to like understand it as clues to like what is going on a bigger level. But you don't want the tail to wag the dog, right? But when you properly understand it, I think obviously you have, as an artist and someone that's deeply passionate about not abandoning your emotion, right? That
embrace them. Embrace them. Just know how to deal with them.
Know how to do it.
Bring
it in. Okay, this is what I'm feeling. I can do something with this.
And don't let rule you. That's another thing. I feel that's important, because otherwise it can ruin your whole day, right?
It can get you into bigger trouble than you ever imagined, where you're like, I'm too emotional about this, and now here I am walking into like a meeting with my boss, and this is something that I probably have struggled with in my life, because it's like I'm like you, where I feel things. Like I look at people, I talk to them, and I absorb everything that's going on with them.
That's interesting.
It can be super heavy. But learning to like take that in and be like, okay, like what are my instincts telling me about this, right? And okay, like what can I do about this? How can I take this raw material of emotion, bring it into me, and then produce some sort of finished product, or some way of
how can you use
internalizing
it
and utilize it as fuel for me, and whether that's hey, like this client isn't treating me fairly, they're asking too much, they're scope creeping, like maybe I'm not going to just blow my fuse on them and call them immediately, hey, what the heck do you think is going on, like this, that, or the other. But it's like I listen to it and it's like, no, something needs to change. and now I can figure out how do I want to change this in a more healthier, productive way, rather than completely disregard it and say, hey,
Yeah.
like my emotions mean nothing, like I'm just feeling this way.
Yeah.
Because I don't think that's a healthy place to live
No.
either. Is, yeah, I don't mean anything, so whatever what I feel, like I'm just lucky to be here, rather than like, no, like what is going on here? How can I find ways, art for you, photography, doing creative things, having conversations is my way, to like take all of these feelings and do something with it, because it's something everyone deals with. We all have happiness, heartbreak, frustration, right? We all go through these range of emotions.
You like it or not, it's there.
Some struggle managing them more than others. Some have lost the connection, I feel.
And think about it, if they don't want to deal with it, it might be worse later on, because they might go to drinking, they might go to, and we can continue the list, right? So it's better to deal with it and acknowledge it, that we actually sense things that probably other people don't pay attention to, or we even observe, not just sensing, but observing as well. But like, just let me give you an example, the beauty of a fallen leaf right on the ground, or like
bark on a tree.
Yeah, I was just about to mention that. Yes. So we have to acknowledge those things, because first of all, to get to something like this, you still have to have inspiration. And I was asked so many times about what gives me inspiration. And inspiration is around you, everywhere. You just have to pay attention. And most of the people don't do that, right? That's why they don't get inspired. And there's another saying now, inspiration needs to find you working, and then it will come, right? But you cannot just wait for it.
No.
And I watched, there were a few funny Instagram videos that just as artists sitting in the chair and, you know, waiting for the inspiration, and then days later waiting still for the inspiration, and it's not going to come like that. I know, I had that feeling so many times.
Like, it's normally just a whisper, hey,
yeah,
think about this, and then if you're not listening, and then willing to like maybe start to build, like, you know, got to take an action. And then
just start doing something.
Anything.
Just start it.
And then it's like your brain starts working and figuring out, like, okay, like this, some feedback, other ideas. Like you're starting to fine tune that paintbrush to like take you where you want to go, and momentum kind of gets in the way.
And that's actually interesting, because another thing is that we don't work the same way each day. And sometimes for me it's hard to accept that, because I know that today finally I have a free day when I'm planning on coming down to my studio, and I want to work the whole day, and I come downstairs and I start to do the work, but it's just not, I'm just not getting there, right? And you just feel that you want to create your next masterpiece, but it's just not going to happen today. And then of course that's when frustration starts to happen, because I know that, oh, tomorrow I need to teach again, or I need to do other things, and then again I'm not going to have time to come downstairs. So I feel that one of the most challenging things is when you have the inspiration. Sometimes it can happen late at night when you should be in bed already, because next day again you have to go to work, but then I have to run downstairs. I have to do something, right? Because it's in your mind, and you just want to put it on canvas. So I feel that these are things that I feel that when you are free in a way that you can 100% focus on your work, I think it's much easier to do all these creations than when you have to do a little bit of this, a little bit of that. I mean, that's okay, and I'm fine with it, as long as it's art related, or as long as I don't have to do something completely different. But one thing that I wanted to mention is that when I read about this and I said, well, I don't want to believe this, but it is true. Now I realize it, that it's only 20% what you paint and you do the artwork. That's just 20%.
Yeah.
The rest is marketing, sitting down, sitting in front of the computer, putting together everything, advertising yourself, networking, writing those emails, answering, taking pictures of your work, right? And I could continue the list.
Right.
And you would say that no, I just want to be in my studio and I just want to create, right? And I wish actually I could afford, and hopefully one day I can afford that I have people doing the rest for me, so then I can actually be in the studio, because then I know that instead of coming up with a few pieces, I could come up with a whole collection in a very short amount of time. But because I need to sit most of the time in front of the computer doing all that typing, I cannot be here, because I cannot be in two places at the same time.
So I guess that brings me to an interesting question from, like, who is your ideal client as far as art? Like, obviously we've been working together trying to grow some things and figure it out, and you have some pieces that you're making, but yeah, it sounds like you'd be almost better suited for someone looking for a massive collection of art, that it's like, hey, like, you want 10 to 20 pieces for your place, like, cool, what are we going to go through here? Let's talk about it. And then kind of be able to make a whole collection for someone who would it sounds like that would be your ideal scenario. I don't know, how do you feel about like one-off custom pieces or commissions, or what's available to purchase from you currently?
There are certain pieces that are available. I'm also putting together a collection now, so I'm working on a series.
Are these part of it?
Yes, these are part of it. As you can see, the color scheme is similar, and so I still have a few of them that I need to. The goal was 10. I'm gonna see if it's gonna be more or not, but I said at least to have 10 similar ones, so that the part of the same collection. And it's called Conversation with the Muse. And now I don't want to get into more details, but there's a whole story.
Yeah, they'll have to follow you.
Yes. If someone is interested, then
Kinga
yeah,
Brassay
they can.
on Instagram.
Yes.
The website's kingabrassay.com.
Sorry, it's Brassay Art.
Brassay Art. Brassay.
Maybe we should just put it in the
We'll put it in there too.
I know I have a difficult name. So since I'm in Canada, everyone is asking me on the phone or wherever I introduce myself, can you spell it, please? Yes, I can. I know. I just have to deal with this.
Think so, brass instruments with an A.
Yeah.
AY.
And then I always say king as king, like Burger King, Lion King. You just put an A at the end. Yeah. Well, anyway, so I'm working on those series, cool. and yeah, you can follow my my art journey on Instagram. I try to post more often now, which again, time to time, I'm gonna be honest, it's a struggle, because I'm so tired while I get there to actually put my mind together what I'm gonna post next. But I know it's important, because I have people following me, even if I don't have a huge followers yet, because I just started to post again after taking a big break for a few years.
I've been on a break too. YouTube is my first. I've completely switched platforms. I'm like, nope, I don't know how I feel about these other ones right now. Let me focus on YouTube first. And because I feel if you can master video, every platform has now become accessible to you. Obviously, there's different ways of editing and doing this, but it's like you look at everything across the board, it's like video. You need video, which brings me to like, maybe, because it is hard to like create content, then edit, and then polish and do these sorts of things.
That's a full-time job, I feel sometimes. If you really want to do it properly, then it's
100%
a full-time job. And then when do I come downstairs to the studio to do my paintings, right?
Which I'm thinking
that's a full-time job too.
Which I think an interesting avenue to explore for you would maybe be live streaming, like, hey, it doesn't take much work other than I'm going to flick on my camera, do it, I'm down here. That way maybe people can interact with you while you're in the studio a little bit. Like, obviously you don't want to be distracted too much, but I think it could also, like, this emotion and processing feelings and people not really wanting to do that, and that's why we have therapists. It's like, I think there is an opportunity online for someone like you that is open about, hey, let's talk about this, where people could kind of follow along and get involved in the conversation without necessarily having to go on their own Instagram and be like, I'm posting stories about how I feel right now, and have all their friends reach out and be like, hey, are you okay? Because
Yeah, and that's another thing, right? That not everyone is okay to
yeah,
admit it. That let's say I had a bad day. We all have bad days, right?
yeah,
But the next day, maybe it might be a good day, right?
right,
So just acknowledging that we are humans, and that's where
yeah,
it takes all my paintings are about the human emotion, right? Just to because I think as long as we live, we're learning how to deal with
yeah.
these emotions, right? It doesn't matter
And
if
there's
you're
new
20
emotions
or if
coming.
you're 50 or whatever, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, and you always have different challenges throughout your
yeah.
lifetime. So
So I think creating that space where people could come have that outlet for, like, here's how I feel, right? Here's someone else that's also processing this stuff, that's creating beautiful artwork and processing with me, you know? I think that's a powerful tool that then ultimately can lead, because YouTube ad revenue and that whole thing of monetization could pay you as the artist, right? To like then do it. This is where I think the world we're going to is super wild, where it's like the
yeah,
content creator
yeah.
is like, you hate to say it in the, like, it's kind of like yick to me, but like at the same time I'm like, I feel like there's something inside of me that I have to share, and like I have to have these conversations and let other people in on them, that I got to do it, right? And then I'm like, okay, if
Then
I'm
that
gonna,
might be your calling,
if
right?
I'm,
So
yeah,
we all have different callings,
yeah,
even if let's say if the reason might be just to, let's say, to deal with the emotions or to just
yeah,
acknowledge it or just things like that, but as long as we find how to
yeah,
even monetize it, right? Because that's also, let's be honest, like we have bills to pay.
totally,
And I always encourage my students that find something that you like doing, because
totally,
let's be honest, we spend majority of our life is at our workplace. So
yeah,
find something that it makes you happy, find something that you enjoy doing.
yeah,
And for example, I loved being an art educator. It really gave me a lot of joy that I can teach other people about
mm-hmm.
all this and what's behind this, right? And we had so many interesting conversations,
Yeah,
art-related conversations about that. Even what's really interesting, that coming from a different continent and had students coming from a completely different continent, but we still have the same emotions.
mm-hmm.
So right, we are humans,
Mm-hmm.
and that's, and then you just have to find that way or that platform how you actually know how to deal with all these emotions.
Yeah, and your vehicle for processing.
Yes, and
Yeah.
yes, to how to process.
So I guess if someone, because you do teach, and if someone wants
Yes.
to become a better artist, they can learn from you. So if they wanted to figure out how to get a lesson from Kinga Brassay, how do they do that?
I'm actually just about to put something together that, because I used to teach at the college, I used to teach through galleries, I used to teach in New York as well, in Canada as well. But I want to do something for myself this time. So I'm just developing that for the future, that to have my
Yeah,
tribe of
curriculum.
students, you know. So
Yeah, for
yeah,
sure.
and I have curriculum because I have so much, because that's what I did
That's
for
all
the
you
last
did.
years, right? And so many years, and I really love doing that. And what I love to do is that it's art related, so I don't have to do something completely different. And I try to encourage my students, right, to always, that I feel that my goal is not just to be an educator or an instructor, right? I have more. I have to encourage them,
Yeah.
because I feel their pain. I know what they're
Yeah.
dealing with, right? I know how difficult it is on this level to actually achieve something. And another thing that I want to mention, and I talk about this a lot, especially when we start a new term, that so many of us, it doesn't matter if it was in Europe or if it's in Canada, heard this sentence: find a real job, right? Because as we're getting back to
That
the
comes
beginning
around.
of our conversation,
For the long,
art
yeah.
is not considered a real job. But then what if that's what you want to do? What if, and I actually had the other day, I had a conversation with my students that, what if that's what your calling is, right? And the world needs artists,
Yeah.
not just doctors, not just lawyers, right? The world is more beautiful because of artists, right? So yeah, I really hope that one day we're gonna get there, that it's gonna be acknowledged as a profession.
Yeah, I still think there's obviously there's some people that figure it out, and I think that's maybe the challenge of it is like being an artist is kind of like being a professional athlete, where a lot of athletes end up becoming like physiotherapists or chiropractic. You know, like they all kind of branch out there. But I do think that the advice a lot of people give is go find a real job, because I think in the end it's like you're probably better off doing that, really, like unless you really have what it takes to like dig in and grind through the trenches and like do it.
You have
so
the consistency. It's not for everyone, and it's okay if some people might feel that yes, they need to find a job next to it. But I still wish that we would have a little more.
But I think that means that like you need to pursue it, right? Because you, even though, and I think that's it. Just the reality is like there is always going to be pressure and things pushing back on you as you're trying to do something, you know. And I think that's part of it, is everyone around you saying, "Hey, give it up, go get a job," and it's the ones that say like, no, I'm going to keep plugging away at this because I may not see exactly how it is going to work right now, but I know that like I'm capable of learning and adapting. And if I keep applying myself, maybe it will just work for me. Right.
And to be honest, there are some artists who are making it as a full-time job, and they making a really good living. I don't want to give names now, but I could come with a few names. And I know it's not a lot of them. I feel that lots of the artists are giving up too early because it is hard. It is difficult. I'm not going to lie about
all the jugglings, right?
Yes. And it's not for everyone. And I've had the feeling so many times that I just what am I doing here, right? Yes, okay, this is beautiful. I'm creating this, but really, let's be serious here, right? And then the next minute I'm reading something that you don't have to give up, right? You just keep going and you're gonna make it. And so all that, but again, it's ups and downs, right? So it's not gonna be like this, even you wish, but it's reality is not like that. I mean, might be for some people, because let's be honest, the whole life, it's about connections. And for example, if we go back to Picasso, for example, I read an interesting fact about Picasso, that's how he became famous, because of his connections and all that, right? Being in all those with all those famous people around and everything. Now, yes, if another thing is location, where do you live, right? Like it would be completely different if I would be in New York, let's say, right? I would have millions of possibilities than instead of being in the middle of the prairie, right? So again, those things are really important. But today we have the internet.
Right.
So it still is possible, just it might take longer. So you have to deal with that, but it's possible.
Yeah, like you might become real big in Japan, you know?
Yeah,
like
and
that's
it's possible.
The crazy thing about
it's possible.
the internet.
And it's interesting because for example, you're mentioning Japan. I had students from Japan, and the biggest problem is always the time difference, right? And with people from Brazil, for example, or like I had students from everywhere, and but it's really possible that today with all the technology that we have. And another thing, mentioning technology, I feel that most of the artists are not good at technology, and I see this, and I know that it's a problem in a way, because just our brain just works differently, and I know for me sometimes it takes a little longer to understand that side of the things.
I think a newer artist probably gets it a lot easier than
younger
you two,
ones, because they grew up already with all the phones and everything. Like I still remember the landline. I wish we would just work with that. I would be totally fine with that.
It's funny because like I'm the youngest of 5 kids, so like all my siblings, I'm 37, so all my siblings are much older than I. So I kind of was just at the very beginning of my life. Was like I was 7 or 8 when we got our first computer, and like 10 when the internet. So but all my oldest sister like kind of is like, technology, what? Because it evolves so fast right now. It's so I've just been playing with that MetaQuest virtual reality thing, and it's blowing my mind what they're doing there, right? Like it's completely nuts. Where it's like, yeah, AI, and like even in the last 2 years, just how rapidly technology has
Yes.
evolved. From like I
Oh,
used to be
AI.
writing content myself to like I have ChatGPT Pro, and it
Yeah.
can do all of the research. It can analyze spreadsheets and build plans, and it's like I just have to know the raw ingredients. That like
Yeah.
yeah, being like Gen X, it bit of an adjustment compared to like the what are the Gen Zs, and now we're into Gen Alpha and Beta, I think it is. Like they all have the pinch zoom iPhone gesture, like it's in their DNA. Like if there's evolution,
I go to my daughter if I have a question,
like
right?
your daughter helped
Technology
figure out all the Instagram
yeah,
reels. And
yeah, and I'm just like, okay, well, I learned something today.
but I think there's a lot less of a foundation of like the younger generation. So it's always interesting like how age and growing and getting older and wiser, it's like you have the foundation like complete. So it's like if you can just figure out how to use these platforms, get technology working for you like the way a 20-year-old would,
Yeah.
it'd be very fascinating to see what would happen.
You know what makes me smile now that you mentioned ChatGPT? I heard about ChatGPT for the first time from you, actually.
Yeah.
You know, when you mentioned ChatGPT, and I'm like, oh, is that a
What's
thing?
this?
Yeah, is
And
that
then
a
you
thing?
do it and you're like,
And now
Are
I
you
love
for-
it.
are you
Now
for
I love
real?
it.
Like-
It's a huge help, actually.
Yeah.
Especially that English is not my
Totally.
first language, right? So it helps a lot as an assistant.
Yeah.
But yeah,
It's funny. I have something I want to share on that note, because I think, yeah, like it still requires editing and putting your own touch
yes,
on
it
it.
definitely.
But what is funny is because, yeah, sometimes I outsource certain jobs to people from like literally all over the world, like Philippines, wherever. And I've noticed since ChatGPT came out, everyone
Everyone is
speaks
perfect, right?
English. And like they say everything you want to hear, and you don't know whether or not like
Yeah.
they're actually. Sometimes you're like, are you actually capable of doing what you're saying in this email?
Yeah.
Because like you're saying all the right things, but I just don't know. And but at the same time, flip the coin. Maybe that was the barrier before, right? People trying to figure out how to say in broken English, like, hey,
Yeah.
I know what I'm doing, but like they're thinking it in another language and understand it completely like comprehensively.
It definitely helps a lot. You just have to know how to use it.
Yeah.
But it helps a lot. And actually, going back to something that we discussed earlier, another funny thing that I mentioned to my students before of I always cover the new assignment, right? Because I teach at the college as well. And the first thing usually is find the reference picture. And then everyone, okay, where do I find the reference picture? Well, where? Google, right? And then I always remind them that, because I'm not that young, you know, and when I was a student, we actually had to go to the library and we had to go through books to find a reference picture. If you need to draw a skull, you had to go to the library. Today, everything is there,
Totally.
right?
And there was
So
no
it's-
Control F, search
No,
for a keyword, and
oh
like
no.
find all the instances
No.
in a document. You're
Yeah.
like, nope. Yeah.
And another funny thing is when they need to draw a self-portrait. And well, take your phone, take a selfie, and then draw yourself, right? And then again, I always talk about when I was a student, we did not have cell phones, right? There were no cell phones at that time, so we had to actually use a mirror. But then you have to focus on not moving your head while you draw like this. And then what if you have to run to the restroom, come back, right? You cannot stop. You cannot come back to the same pose. So yeah, a lot of struggle, but we still somehow.
But that's where I think you have the foundation now, because you've been through that struggle. And it's
yeah,
like,
well, I can compare it definitely with what do we have today. The newer generation cannot compare it because that's what they got, right? So that's what they have. So they cannot even imagine, like, how was life before cell phones, right? Like, well, and even today, I actually ask myself, like, probably today I would not feel good if I would forget about my phone, right? Or I would just leave it at home. But we grew up like that, right? And we were safe. We were
being in the moment.
Yeah, we were.
Present.
That's another thing. Or if we had to meet with someone, then we were there, and we find the way if we couldn't make it. But today, even with all the cell phones and everything, people are still not coming to the meeting, or still not showing up, or they're
not
still late, or
engaged.
not even calling. And
Yeah.
you see, and somehow we still managed it long ago. So
Yeah.
it's,
No, it is interesting. Yeah, the relationship, I think younger generation, like I work with my nephew, brought him into a few projects, and it is interesting to see where their brain works. But the constant thing I notice is it's like, you think it's all just too easy, right? And you don't have an appreciation sometimes for like the true foundation beneath like the creative art and what we're trying to do, and talking to people and extracting information and then building it and knowing how all of the tools worked, and
yeah.
what the steps were. Where, yeah, I was listening to a podcast with Mark Zuckerberg, and he's talking a lot about AI. He's like, literally 2025, it's going to be another crazy year for AI, where people can ultimately like hire an AI agent that serves as like a mid-level developer that can like work for you, like a completely autonomous digital agent that like can go out and maybe start doing prospecting, or like helping you fix your website, or doing all of these sorts of things, where it kind of it changes. And I think the creative pursuit that you're on is good, because that's the one part that's like hard, that little sprinkle of pixie dust, or what's the idea, right? Like the origination of it, and having your mind and spirit, soul, whatever, being tuned into that, I think is going to play well in the world of AI, because it's going to be who has the best questions, who has an original idea, because we're going to have all the tools. It's not going to be like, okay, I can write lines of code, so like I have a purpose, right? Obviously, understanding how code works will benefit you in the future, but it's going to be more what needs to exist. And I have all of these tools that can create it, but what should exist, right?
I have the feeling with AI that we can actually compare it a little bit with emotions, what we discussed earlier, that AI will be beneficial and it will be good if we know how to use it, right? But otherwise...
Yeah, it's a very dangerous slope, but I don't think there's any stopping it at this point.
Yeah.
I think my biggest concern about AI is maybe the regulations and the people in power that are choosing how it's defined today, but then in 4 years there's going to be an election in the States again, and maybe the people that are now in charge, or whoever, even the ones that are in today, like how do they set the framework and the rules around it so that it doesn't become a dangerous thing, right?
Yeah,
like,
and we have a lot of conversation about this with my students, actually, because some of the students in art, right, they are worried about this, right? Like, like how it's gonna be, like if AI comes and is gonna be able to do an even better picture than I do here, right? But
it may not be able to do. It'll probably, there was a thing in like the machine learning world that like a breast cancer doctor had a 96% accuracy in detecting breast cancer in women. The best AI algorithm was at 92. This was a few years ago, so it might be different now. But together, there were 99%.
Yeah.
So it's like the AI might be able to create something cool, but I think when it's working with someone who has a fine-tuned skill for this sort of a thing, that it's just going to elevate it to a whole nother level, and you're going to be able to produce more, or it's just going to go.
I think the word is anyway different when it's made by a human.
Yeah.
And with all the struggle and all the frustration and all the work and everything, right? Then when it's done by AI, right, and it's there, it might be the same result, but it's not created by a human. So so that.
But it could be too. Like a human has a role. Like I'm thinking, imagine you just had all the money in the world and you're like, I'm going to build this like 3D machine that can like actually paint. I'm going to hook that up to a computer, and then I'm going to work with the computer to actually paint physical things with AI.
Yes, I can imagine that. So then again, we create something with the use of AI.
Yeah.
But I was mentioning more like created 100% by AI, right? So that's a different. I feel that's a different thing. And another thing that we're coming back to what we discussed earlier is in my classes, I get the question very often that can we work digitally? And I try to encourage my students at the beginning not to use any digital works, because I really want everyone to get familiar with paper, with charcoal. How is that when you touch the paper? Because the new generation, they have no idea. Everyone is great at digital drawings, but they have no idea actually how is to work on a paper. How does it feel like? How when your hands are dirty because you're using charcoal. And another thing that I was really surprised during my teaching career, I was teaching on site years ago, and we had a project where they actually had to take pieces from magazine and cut certain things and glue it together and put it on a board. And they were struggling. They were struggling with these simple tasks so much. And they were amazing when they had to put it together. They put it together as a mood board on the computer. But when it comes back to just cutting with a scissor and doing a beautiful collage, let's say, or anything, or a mood board
something
with
very
that.
tactile.
Yeah, and then, they're lost. Because everything, they can do everything on the computer. They can do everything on the tablet or digitally. But when it comes to actually doing it in real life,
they can't
they're
cut
lost.
a straight line.
No, they cannot use the scissor. Like it's somehow painful to realize that. Like seriously, like.
Yeah, we've progressed in some ways, regressed in many others.
Yes, that's true.
That is very interesting. I like that.
Yeah, so I realized this over the years.
You kind of reminded me, I think I was about 25, and there was a New Year's resolution that I was like, I'm going to paint stuff this year, right? Because my relationship with painting and art was always, it was school, and like, I didn't go into all of the art classes. I took some communication technology, did graphic design and screen printing in high school, but I never went to like the fine art class. And my relationship with art at school was always like, you get one paper, don't screw it up, right?
And you have to
and
learn
you're going to
that.
be graded on this.
And you have to learn that as well.
And you're going to paint this pony that I've instructed you. And I was like, I don't know. When I was 25, I'm like, I need to go back to this. And I think you really nailed it, where like I'd sat in my apartment, I had this piece of plywood on the ground that I'd put a canvas down, and for weeks at a time, like I'd just leave this thing on the floor, and I'd come by, and it was like, what does a paintbrush and paint on a canvas feel like? Was literally the first question I had to answer for myself. Is like, you see people doing this, and like, but like, what does it actually?
And it feels easy, but when you start it do it for the first time,
it's super therapeutic. Like not necessarily the result, right? But
the process
but
itself.
The actual feeling of dipping the paintbrush in the paint and like brushing it and feeling that like interaction between the brush and the canvas and the paint kind of soothed me. Like it was like a back scratch in a way, but like for my senses.
Sometimes you should see me. How do I look in the studio when I'm in the middle of creating, let's say, something like this? The other day I took a picture of myself, and I feel like a child, and I don't mind it. I don't mind it. It's the whole process is so dirty while I get to this. But there's water, right? So you can wash it off later on, and that's it. But not everyone is okay with that. And we had conversation about this as well, that lots of my students, they just don't love working with charcoal, for example, because they're gonna get dirty, and they don't like that. And I said, well, that's the beauty of it, right? Like, you get dirty, your clothes are gonna get dirty. So, one of my struggles is actually when I know that when I come to the studio, I need to change my clothes, because so many times, like I don't have patience, and I just want to do it right now.
You're
and
like
I
wearing your
ruin
nice sweater.
so many of my favorite clothes, and I work with acrylics, and you cannot remove that later on. So it's done.
No, it is interesting.
Gone.
I played around with acrylics. My first painting sucked. Then it was what I really enjoyed was like, I just paint over it and I'll start again.
Yes. Actually, that's what I fell in love with acrylics.
Yeah.
I used to paint in oil years ago, but there you have to wait a lot.
Oil? I did one painting in oil, and I was mind blown by how long it took to dry.
Yes, and then if you do a mistake, that's the thing. You do a mistake, and then you do another layer. You can't, because you have to wait till it's gonna.
5 days.
You have to wait. Not with this one. I don't like how it looks. Maybe I take a break, or maybe I do something else, or I just put gesso on one of my other canvases. I come back and I can redo it. And for me, it matters a lot, right? So I don't have the patience anymore to wait with oil. So
Totally.
I feel acrylics, for me, it's much better.
I think we're coming to the end. Any final thoughts that you have? Share your socials, your website,
Yes.
how people can get in touch with you.
Yes, if you would love to follow my art journey, then definitely one thing that I try to be better with Instagram, so you can follow what I'm doing there. Time to time I'm posting. I try to post on a consistent level, so to have new works as well there. I'm working on my website as well, so there as well you can find some of my newest works. I'm working on the series as well. Of course, I cannot post everything on social media. Feel free to reach out to me. I try to get back to you as soon as possible. You can DM me, you can send an email, whatever.
Through the website?
Yes, through the website. Yes, through the website. But Instagram, I feel I get back.
It's like having it's like having your phone number.
Yeah, or it's just like a Teams, like you send a quick Teams message. And I'm actually working on putting together my own classes. So if someone is interested, my goal, as I mentioned, is not just to teach you certain things, but to encourage you as well, right? Because I understand your struggle, I understand your goals, I understand your frustrations, I understand that you have something inside that tells you that you need to create, right? And then as much as I can, I try to help you to get there.
So if you're
creativity.
interested in your art journey, Kinga can help you. If you're interested in art for yourself,
art
your
collectors,
office, your home,
art lovers, art collectors.
Kinga would also be happy to have a conversation about what that looks like. She has quite the extensive collection in the works that probably would look good on someone's walls.
And I have much more than what I have on my website. So that's another thing that...
You're a creator. You just keep creating, and I like that about you, and that's, I think, why we get along. And I appreciate you doing this crazy adventure of sitting down here and having a conversation with me.
Of course. Well, I enjoyed it.
It's kind of like, I feel like this is like art.
I feel like we cannot stop because there's so much to talk about.
We could just keep going, and I think we'll I want to have something that's a recurring segment on the show that like we have this conversation, because I feel art is a big piece of my life, and you're one of the few people like I can really go deep on the subject of creativity, art, and what it means to me, because a lot of other people are like, numbers and cents, like what does that mean? And and I'm like, okay, but why are we doing all of this? Like we want to make money and we want to like build something successful, but like there's got to be a why behind all of this, and that's where I feel art and creativity has really helped me in my life, is like, what is the point of this, right? Like, sure, like we'll get money. Like I'm a pretty simple person in the sense that like there's a few things that I like to have in my life, and then the rest of it is like, okay, what else can we do with this to like continually build and like get more people on board building and doing. And even though entrepreneurship isn't for everyone, I think it's important for people to take on characteristics of an entrepreneur and whatever they're doing.
But it can be learned as well. That's another thing that I also try to encourage people, because sometimes we say that, I cannot do this, right? But you don't even try, right? Like, and what I realized that now that I'm taking this again more seriously, because I mentioned I stopped, I focused more on just teaching, then I did not have time to do this. Now I want to focus more on this. But there are so many things that can be learned, right? You just have to be open. You just have to be flexible. And even I think being an entrepreneur is one of those. Yes, it might not be for everyone. I completely agree.
Like there's some people I'd be like, nah, I don't know if you
they're not even open.
It.
They don't even want to deal with it, right? And that's okay. That's
fine.
Again okay, right? Not everyone is a lawyer. Not everyone is an artist. So that's okay. But try to keep at least
an open mind.
An open mind about at least try it. And if you see that it's not for you, it's okay, right? But I feel that lots of artists are losing there because they just give up too easily and too early that
Yeah.
I just don't know how to do this, right? And I'm going to be honest, I was overwhelmed, and I'm still am with all the things that I need to do. So that what's this? You know me, right? With all that technology and the new things and everything.
Yeah.
But I try as much as I can.
Totally.
I try to learn. I feel sometimes that I'm rusty. I feel I'm too old for all this, but I'm still learning. So
Yeah, but it's like you keep
step by
growing.
step,
you be
and
the turtle, right?
yeah.
Always keep going, no matter how slow.
And I feel that even just in a few months, like when I look back into the last months, right, I grew so much and I learned so much, right? So if you don't stop and you continue doing that, then
Right.
who knows where it's going to take you.
Exactly. So
Encouragement for everyone
all.
who's watching this and is interested in art and creativity, and and feel free to reach out because I'm here to help. I'm sure you're here to help if anyone has any questions.
Totally,
so,
They know where to find me. Give Kinga a follow. Reach out to her if you have any questions or just want to talk about art in general. And don't forget to subscribe to the page. And we'll see you next time with our next guest.
Have a wonderful day.